Yeah, sorry it's taken me a little bit of time, Jennifer. Thanks.
Oh, welcome. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Collybird Council's Audit Committee meeting of 22nd September 2020. Welcome to members of the press and the public watching this meeting live. I'm Councilor Jennifer Miller-Smith and I'm chair of the Audit Committee. This is a meeting being held in public and not a public meeting. There will be no public question time at any council meeting while virtual committee meetings are being held. The public and press can still hear and see the meeting, but public speaking has been suspended, and any written questions submitted in advance will be acceptable by the council monitoring officer will be read out as answered. There will be no supplementary questions. The agenda for this meeting is published and available on the council's website. For any committee meeting held virtually, all voting will be held via a recorded vote taken by a Democratic Services team member on behalf of the chair, whereby individual councilors will be asked at the end of the debate to state if they are for, against, or if they wish to abstain for the recommendation before them at that time. The exceptions to this are the approving of the minutes from the previous meeting or any other procedural item where the item's full recommendation to a committee member is to note the report. For those items, the chair will move the item, seconded by the vice chair, and it will be presumed agreed unless a dissenting comment from any committee member is made. Before I invite members of the committee to confirm their attendance, I ask that they please ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or on silent. Their backgrounds are set to generic office backgrounds, and they are aware of their surroundings so that they are not disturbed during the meeting. This includes making sure all TVs, radios, and smart speakers are switched off. Committee members are reminded that they should have their microphones turned off when speaking and their cameras turned off unless they are requesting to speak. When asked to speak, please turn your camera on, unmute yourselves, and pause 3 seconds to allow a slight time delay in connection. With this in mind, committee members are asked to be aware of who will follow in the voting process and to prepare accordingly. In respect of agenda items 2 and 3, we will be taking these items together. May I ask the officers supporting this meeting to introduce themselves, giving their name and job title.
Ms Matthews, Democratic Services Officer. I can confirm there's been no apologies for absence.
Heather Girling, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. We will now be taking committee member introductions together with items 2 and 3. Please may I ask committee members, when called upon, to confirm their name and the ward they represent, if they have any declarations of interest to make, if they agree with the minutes of the meeting of the audit to be held on 30th September 2019.
And we'll start with Councillor Tina Belbin, please.
Thank you. Councillor Tina Belbin, Pound Hill North and Forge Wood. I have no declarations of interest and I agree the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Flack.
My name is Morgan Flack. I represent Southgate Ward. I also have no interest to declare and I approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Michael Jones. I represent Bewbush and Broadfield North. I have no interest to declare and I approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Miller-Smith.
Thank you. Councillor Jennifer Miller-Smith. I represent Wayne Ward and I approve the minutes. I have no declaration of interest and I approve the minutes of the meeting for this meeting.
And Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. Good evening. Councillor Jonathan Purdy, representing Three Bridges. I have no interest to declare and I stand silent on the approval of the minutes as I was not present at the previous meeting, not being a member of the committee at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any non-audit committee councillors present? Heather, no. Okay. The committee agrees that the minutes of the meeting of the audit committee held on 30th September 2019 are an accurate record of the meeting. Have there been any written questions submitted that were accepted under the Constitution and subsequently published in the supplementary agenda?
We haven't received any, Chair, no.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to consideration of the reports, beginning with the progress report and risk management. Would Gillian Edwards, Audit and Risk Manager, please present the report to the committee? Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you, Chair. This is the progress report for the period 1st of September 2019 to 31st of August 2020. Since that time, we have completed 9 audits and we've attended certain project boards, which are highlighted on the report. We were on target to complete our audit plan at 31st of March, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown, the inaccessibility to the town hall and the other workloads of my staff and members of other employees in the council, we didn't manage to complete the whole of the audit plan. And there's a number of audits that we started, substantially completed, but didn't report on. We've also revised this year's audit plan. I've been working with Karen Hayes, Section 151 officer, and I'll come back to you in November to provide you with details of what we intend to complete before the year end. There were no high priority findings to report in this period. There were 2 follow-up audits that were due to be completed, but due to the call on the people's time due to the pandemic, we haven't done those yet, but we do intend to complete these when we start the audits again in the next few weeks. We've also undertaken 621 Freedom of Information requests in this period. During the first 3 months of lockdown, we hardly received any, which allowed some of my staff time to go and work on other things. But the last 3 or 4 months, they've come back more so than normal. And out of the 621, 23 of these were actually responded to late. That was mainly due to the people that had to provide the responses being diverted to other jobs or just extra busy because of the new demands of the COVID pandemic. If I could now hand over, please, to Karen Hayes to talk through the corporate risks.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Karen Hayes. I'm the Head of Corporate Finance and the Section 151 Officer. The corporate management team review our corporate risks on a regular basis. Some of the areas have their own board meetings, such as the Town Hall and the Crawley Growth Programme boards. If I can point you to Section 5.2, which shows our risks. The Town Hall has separate strands of governance and meetings occur regularly. Risks for the Town Hall are shown from Section 23. The Town Hall Board review these risks at each meeting, and the risks in excess of a score of 10 are our key risks. Other risks included in the work around the Crawley Growth Programme. There are several strands to this programme and all are at different stages. We've seen that there are some delays due to COVID-19, but the board is looking at those on a regular basis. Another risk is delivering the affordable housing programme, and the risk there is over the medium term as we try to identify development sites, and this is becoming more and more difficult. The transformation programme has been accelerated due to the pandemic, with people working more flexibly and working from home, and this will be going to a future overview and scrutiny commission, and the programme will be revised. As part of transformation, the Corporate Projects Assurance Group meet regularly to ensure that major projects are delivered effectively. Other risks shown here include disaster recovery, including information technology and our telecoms. We've also got data breaches there, which Gillian Edwards can explain to you when I finish this section. As for me as a Section 151 officer, there is a need to balance the budget, and this is a key area of concern due to the impact of the pandemic, And councillors are meeting tomorrow at an all-member seminar to look at options and how we're going to balance the budget going forward. Organisational capacity has been identified as a risk, and this has been really been tested over the last 7 months. Also, succession planning. Here, the corporate management team discussed measures to ensure that we grow our own and that we can ensure that we've got some future leaders. Other strategic risks are discussed on pages 19 and 20, and I'm happy to take any questions. Town hall risks are on page 23 to 29. I'll now pass you back to Gillian. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I'd like to just talk about data breaches quickly. I've been involved in reviewing data breaches for approximately 7 years, along with the recently retired head of legal, democracy and HR. Since she left last week, I'm now responsible for making the initial assessment about whether a breach has been made and whether it should be reported to the ICO, because not all are to be reported. And that's within a 72-hour timescale. Based upon the severity of the breach and the number of people affected, that's the decision-making process really to decide if it's reportable. We do have the odd breach here and there. There's been nothing serious in the last 5 years, I should say, maybe even 6 years. We've had data protection training when the new GDPR regulations came in, and this is refreshed regularly, and I'm intending to update this in the very near future. I'd now like to move on, please, to my progress, my table at the end of, sorry, I can't see where it is, hang on please.
Are you looking
on? Yeah, sorry, on sorry, my technology
21?
just died on me. Yes, sorry, page 21. You can see the work in progress and the work that we've completed. The work we've completed corresponds to the first page of my report. The work in progress, that corresponds to the work that we had started but hadn't yet completed. The other work is also documented on the front page. And we also, as I think you're aware, provide Mid Sussex District Council with 220 audit days a year as part of a shared service arrangement, and we completed their audit plan as at the 31st of March. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The process for discussion on the report will be as follows. Any committee member wishing to speak should turn their camera on. This will signify to the Democratic Services Officer your request to speak. You will then be invited to speak one by one. When you are called on to speak, please unmute your microphone and check that your screen is surrounded by a red box before speaking, pausing for 3 seconds to allow for the time delay. Please turn off your camera and microphone when you have finished speaking and are no longer live. All committee members who have indicated will be called to provide comments and ask questions in turn, with officers responding to any queries raised. The views expressed by the committee during the discussions and any action will be acknowledged and documented by the officers. If there are to be any alternative recommendations, then please propose these when providing comments. We will now begin consideration of the report. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to reiterate that we'll say a few words, but if you do have any comments or questions, then go ahead and turn your camera on. In the meantime, I wanted to thank Jillian for the report. I know that it's been a challenge during, and Karen, to get this work done. And certainly, I think we all appreciate this information and the work that you've done in the meantime.
Chair, we have Councillor Tina Belbin requesting.
Thank you. It's just a quick question. This risk assessment was done on the 16th of July. That's what, over 2 months out of date now. I'm just wondering where we are at with some of these trials on the town hall, please. Do you feel the risk is going down or is it going up? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The board have looked at the risks since that date, but have not needed to revise them, so they still remain the same. There will always be a risk of being over budget. At the moment, we're well within budget, but because of the pandemic, there may be issues around procurement and sourcing some goods. There's also a risk about letting the upper floors, but we're being assured by the letting agent that businesses will be looking for regional offices rather than London-based offices, and getting grade A offices in somewhere that's easily accessible, like Crawley, will be sought after. So we're hoping if we can sign some dotted lines that we can reduce the risk there. Thank you.
That's great to hear, because hopefully people will be moving out of London and because people don't want to commute anymore, and having offices close to shops and things will make them more easy to let. I was just a bit concerned because it says you were going to consult the letting agencies, but you've had positive feedback, which is good to hear. Very good to hear. Thank you.
We have Councillor Purdy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Building on that previous question actually causes me to create another one, which is I take and probably agree with the view that we will be able to let the upper floors of the town hall, given that that will be the only grade A office space available across the town. That prompts two questions. One, will we get the expected revenue that we are hoping for it? And two, it's all well and good for us to have rented out our town hall. Will our investment be crowding out the private sector, resulting in more empty buildings elsewhere in the town and therefore damaging the overall economic recovery? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The data that we're getting from the letting agents is that we will receive the rental figure that we budgeted for. We were quite prudent when we were budgeting for actually letting individual floors, and they're being a little bit more optimistic. But for the time being, I prefer to keep it as it is. I can't really comment on other offices around the town. When we actually signed on the dotted line for this project, we didn't know a pandemic was coming around the corner, which would so significantly impact on Crawley because of the airport. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Obviously, that's one to watch as the building develops. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully everyone has had a chance on the committee to ask a question or speak if you wanted to. Otherwise, jump in right now. I mean, obviously, I think the whole thing that we're going to have tonight throughout this is the challenges that we've faced around COVID in being able to conduct some of the work and you know, get reporting done. But I think actually I would hope the committee would like to note that we appreciate there was a substantial amount of work completed given the difficulties that we have experienced. So thank you. If all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, we will now move on to the recommendations that set out in the reports. I'm right on time. I'm good to go. I move that the committee receive the report and note progress to date. And I ask the Vice Chair.
You've not got a sore throat, have you, Jennifer?
No.
I would like to formally second that recommendation.
Okay. Is that agreed? Yes. Right. It's great. The report has been. Okay. The report has been noted. Sorry, just catching my breath here. So, oops, I'm here. We're now going to move on to agenda item 6, the consideration of the Audit and Risk Manager's Annual Report 2019-2020. Jillian Edwards, and thank you, our Audit and Risk Manager, please present the report to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. As part of the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, which are the guidelines that govern all of the internal audit sections in public bodies, I'm required to provide an annual Head of Audit opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk management and control. This is based upon the work that we've undertaken this year, notwithstanding the lockdown period and the COVID pandemic, and I'm pleased to say that we'd covered sufficient work for me to form my opinion. My overall opinion is that of substantial assurance can be given that there's generally a good sound system of internal control and that it's being applied consistently, along with a strong risk management and governance culture and arrangements. As far as the effectiveness of our work is concerned, I can confirm that work was carried out to the required standards, and in order for me to provide my overall Head of Audit opinion, I personally supervise and review all audits, and I'm satisfied on the effectiveness of the work. I also have to provide to you a statement on the conformance with the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, and specifically the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. This is made up of all of the different strands of the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, and it governs how we are to work as an internal audit section. It covers such areas of having policies and procedures in place for undertaking the work, making sure staff have got the requisite skills and experience, work is conducted to the correct standard, and that auditor independence is maintained. I undertook this review at the end of March and can confirm for the year 2019-2020 we did conform. If you have any questions on the report, I'd be very happy to take any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now begin consideration of the report. Again, the process for discussion will be the same as before. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak. Thank you. And we'll give you a minute to do that as well.
Councillor Purdy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that the difficulties that have been experienced over the last few months, and I would commend the team on the work that they've achieved. But I suppose I'm struggling with the overall assessment of the report, which is substantial, which, despite the description, is actually the highest possible rating that can be given. Of the 21 areas listed on page 38, 12 have been audited and rated substantial, and that is very good to see. Of the other 9, 2 are rated satisfactory and 2 are rated satisfactory and 7 have yet to be finalised. In that position, I feel a little uncomfortable about giving a substantial rating to the entire report. There's nothing in there to me that suggests that it's not satisfactory. And I do just wonder how other members of the committee feel about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Am I okay to speak? Sorry. Yeah. The overall assessment is made not just on the internal control environment, which is where we look at the key risks within audits and test against those to make sure they're being complied with. We look at the overall governance arrangements and we look at the risk management arrangements. There's 3 strands to my overall assurance. I can understand Councillor Purdy's concerns that we haven't covered all of the work. Based upon the governance side of things, I've worked closely with corporate management team in coordinating the preparation of the annual governance statement, but it's not my document, but I've confirmed I'm happy with the contents of it, and that shows we've got strong governance arrangements. As far as risk management arrangements are concerned, we look at those during every audit. We base all of our work on risk, and as Karen Hayes has pointed out through the discussion on the strategic risk register, the main corporate risks are well controlled and they're regularly reviewed and mitigated. I can understand that it looks like we haven't maybe covered enough work to have given an opinion of substantial. However, in my opinion, we've covered sufficient work in the audits that we haven't reported upon for me to form that opinion. I didn't expect to find any high priority findings, and we didn't, but we were only auditing to the 31st of March before it was 1 week after lockdown occurred. So based upon all of the things, all of the strands that make up my overall opinion, I stand by my opinion of substantial, but I'm happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
We have Councillor Jones next, indicating with his camera.
Hello, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I think I've looked at the papers quite carefully, and I don't have any problem with the officers giving the advice they have. I think that obviously we're there to look at the evidence and to reach our own conclusions. But saying that, there's nothing that I've read that would make me feel anything other than comfortable with the recommendation of substantial assurance that we've been given. So I'm personally happy with it.
Do you want to respond?
I'd like to just thank Mrs. Edwards for the feedback and comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I mean, I feel I take sort of Jonathan's points, but I also think part of looking at the internal audit overall will be, you know, how things have been going along, the overall picture. And so I'm sure that sort of helps you to make the judgment that you can give us, that you think it can be substantial at the moment, even though there are some things to still complete. So has everyone had a chance to speak, hopefully, who would like to do so? Then if we could move on to the recommendation as set out in the report. I move that the committee receive the report and note progress to date, and I ask that the Vice Chair seconds.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that recommendation.
Okay, is that agreed?
Great.
Okay, the report has been noted. Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 7, fee scale for the audit 2020-2021 and update on 2019-2020. Thank you. Sorry. So for the fee scale and the update, please would Karen Hayes, Head of Corporate Finance, present the report to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Here we're just simply sharing a letter with the members of the Audit Committee that came from PSAA, which is Public Sector Audit Appointments. Many authorities 4 years ago went through a joint procurement for their auditors through PSAA, and we were appointed EY as our auditor. You'll see on page 40 that the fee for 1920, which is the accounts that we're presenting to you tonight, was £50,291. The proposed charge is significantly higher than that, but I suggest we discuss that under the next agenda item. So the paper is simply to note. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think that should be taken under agenda item 8 when it comes up. We will now begin consideration of the report, the letter. The process for discussion is the same as before. Please turn on your camera if you wish to speak. Okay, I'm assuming as we're noting the letter that no one's turned their camera on. We're probably...
We have no members wishing to speak, Chair.
Yes, okay, fine. So thank you. All the committee members, then no one's wishing to speak. So we'll move out on to the recommendation as set out in the report. And I move the committee now note the fee scale and updates and ask the vice chair to please second.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay. Is that agreed?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. And is that agreed by the committee? Okay, so the fee scale and update have been noted. Thank you. So now we are going to do agenda item 8, which is the audit results report, kind of year ended 31st of March 2020, as it's not a complete report as yet. So we will move on to consider this report, which was issued as a supplementary agenda item. Would Andrew Britton, please, who's Associate Partner for Ernst & Young, please present the report to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present our report. So Andrew Britton, Associate Partner from EY and the engagement lead for the Crawley Borough Council external audit. Also present in the meeting is Joe Taylor, who's the Ernst & Young manager for the audit. I think, as has already been reflected in some of the discussion in this meeting today, I ought to start with some opening remarks that clearly this year's audit has been a challenging one for some very obvious reasons. There have both been the logistical challenges associated with switching to doing the audit entirely remotely, which was something that we obviously had to adjust to at relatively short notice following the lockdown, and also technically as well in terms of some of the issues that have presented themselves both for the finance team preparing the accounts and for us as auditors auditing the accounts, given the requirement to draw up a set of accounts as at the 31st of March, clearly just 10 days after lockdown started. So it's therefore just start by expressing my thanks to the team at Crawley, to Karen and to Paul and to the wider team in working with us to do this. As you noted, Chair, and as I say in my opening letter, there are a number of changes as a result of the COVID impact, and it has clearly also meant that some areas are harder to close out because of some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, and I'll try and touch on all of those as we go through the report. Appreciate the report has a lot in it, and that's because it meets the requirements in terms of the regulations of what we need to report to you as those charged with governance. So I'll try and step through and pick out the particular bits that I think are of significance for members to take into account. So if I start on the executive summary, which commences on just at the top of page 5. So as already mentioned, we had an audit plan that was due to be presented to the March committee. Obviously, the March committee was then cancelled because of the outbreak of the pandemic, and was then distributed in lieu of that. So first thing is to just update you in terms of the change in scope as a result of or since then, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and the regulations that were issued accordingly. So the first thing is that the deadline for councils to prepare their draft accounts was moved, and equally the publication date for final audited accounts was also moved. In that case, for as it says there, from the 31st of July to the 30th of November. Secondly, you will see that we've made some changes to our risk assessment. Clearly, as I said, one of the issues was drawing up a set of accounts at the 31st of March was that at that point in time there was a considerable amount of uncertainty as to what was going on in the wider economy as well as within the local government sector. So the significant changes to flag to you are those three listed there. One, in terms of the valuation of property, plant and equipment, including investment property. The RICS, who are the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, issued guidance that all valuers doing work on property at the end of as at the end of 31st of March should recognise that by referencing the material uncertainty in place at that point in time. That then therefore has resulted in us looking in more detail at the work that the valuers have done for hopefully fairly obvious reasons. Secondly, there is an increased requirement for acknowledging the impact that COVID-19 had on the organisation and how it had been addressed in relation to the disclosures around going concern and the wider impact of COVID. And then the third one, which is possibly good news, was that it was decided by SIPFA LASAC that IFRS 16, which would have been adopted as at the 1st of April 2020, would be deferred 1 year, and that meant there was less work that was required to be done and disclosed in the 1920 accounts. The other thing to report to you in terms of change of scope is, as always, we in the audit plan we base it on materiality that we audit to. We base on the figures available from the prior year. We update that at year end, and you can see laid out for you there some changes, some relatively small changes in the materiality levels which we are working to for the purposes of our audit. If I then just skip a couple of pages in terms of status. So there are three main areas which remain outstanding at this point in time. We've completed a considerable amount of work, but the three main areas still to be completed are listed there for you. One, in relation to the valuation work, as I said, as a result of COVID-19, we extended the significant risks that we were looking at, and that work between which involves involvement of both the valuers that the council appoints and also our specialists valuers as well, has still to conclude. Second one there is on the pension fund net asset. The pension fund work, we rely on the work of the West Sussex County Pension Scheme auditors in order to avoid the pension scheme being audited by all of the admitted bodies, sets of auditors, due to, again, some of the issues associated with COVID in relation to both the valuation of some of the pension scheme assets and some issues in relation to membership data. They have yet to report to us, and until they do so, obviously, we cannot conclude on the Crawley Council share of that asset. And then the third one, just to highlight to you there, says relating to going concern. Clearly, we need to come to a conclusion on the disclosures in relation to COVID-19 and its impact on the council, and we can't do that till we have a final set of statements, which we then need to actually take through an additional consultation process that the firm has put in place to ensure that the quality associated with disclosures is consistent and robust across the opinions that EY issues. The other ones there issued towards the bottom are things that you would obviously expect to be outstanding at the as we go through the close the final close process. At the bottom of that page, just at the time of writing, we've got no adjusted or unadjusted audit differences to bring to your attention above the reporting threshold. Finally, just on the just to bring to your attention, and there's a bit more detail further on, but in the plan we outlined one risk in relation to our value for money conclusion. For those people, those members who haven't seen this before, our value for money conclusion is not a conclusion on whether what the council does is value for money, but whether there are arrangements in place to enable Crawley to deliver value for money in terms of taking informed decisions, working with partners and deploying resources in a sustainable manner. And we identified a risk around the significant event during the year in terms of signing the contract with Kier, and we did work around the project governance and project and risk management in relation to that, and we have concluded that there are no matters to bring to your attention, and we would intend to issue an unqualified value for money conclusion on the account on that part of of our opinion. I don't have anything else I was going to cover in that. Before going into any further detail, I'm happy to pause there, Chair, and take any questions at this point.
I think we'll probably get through the report. If members can please make a note for themselves of any areas they might like to go back to as we go along. We'll carry on, please, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay. That's fine. I will carry on. So the next section just highlights the recaps the risks that we'd highlighted in the plan and what work we've done on them. In the interests of brevity, I will cover the first two slides in one go, which is these are the significant risks that you'll see on all audit plans and all audit results report, because they relate to risks that are required under ISO 240, the International Standards of Auditing, to be recognised and addressed in relation to management override and risk of fraud in revenue and, in the case of public sector, expenditure recognition. So we've completed all our work on this, with the exception of anything that relates to the valuations work previously referenced, and we have no issues to report to you on those two particular significant risks. On the next one, which is in relation to the valuing of property, plant and equipment, including investment properties and assets under construction. As mentioned earlier, we expanded the risk in response to the coronavirus outbreak, and looked at the valuations that were being provided and the work done by both the valuers and the council in relation to that. We have, as I mentioned earlier, identified a couple of differences in terms of looking at the approach taken by the valuers, and again using our specialists to compare and contrast what we would expect to see in those specific circumstances. The amounts and the reasons there are detailed there, and those are the matters that we're looking to close out as soon as possible. The other point to reference and bringing to your attention is, as I said earlier, all valuers at this for March year ends puts a material uncertainty on their valuation report, and therefore we do work to understand what impact that has had on the valuation report. However, one of the things that we will consider and will go through, take through the consultation process I referred to earlier, is whether there is an emphasis of matter required in our reporting to point this out. It is, as it says there very clearly, that is not a modification of our opinion. It's just a potential way of highlighting to the reader the importance of what the valuers said when they did their valuation work as at the 31st of March. In terms of other areas that we looked at, we've already mentioned the pensions, and the explanation I gave earlier is in a bit more detail there. The one other thing to point out for those with longer memories who remember last year's audit was there was one last year, there is another one this year, of legal claims which have been brought by various members of public sector schemes, where they are where the actuaries have had to assess what they think the impact could be for local government schemes. In this case, it's McLeod, which rolled forward from last year, and Goodwood, which is a new one this year. We've taken those into account when we've been doing our work, and are comfortable that any adjustment required would not be material in the context of those, because the issues of those the issues relating to those arose after the end of the year. We're comfortable that no disclosure or adjustment is required for those in the 1920 accounts.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I am actually going to pause you for a moment at this point to ask if, not the committee members yet, please, but I would like to ask if our head of finance has any comments at this point that might also be useful, or any of the members of our team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to identify that there are no errors that have been made against a finance team that were under a tremendous amount of pressure during COVID. The amount of information that we're having to supply to the government at the same time. Plus, they were heavily involved in paying out all the business grants that we've had to pay, over almost 900 business grants. So I just wanted to thank the team at this point in time. Thank you.
Yeah, we have the chief accountant as well. Do you want to report in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's still some ongoing audit areas to resolve. I think the one with the valuers, there's two sets of valuers with different opinions at a time of great uncertainty. So it's not really a surprise that they've come to two different numbers. I think that's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, sorry, I just wanted to say if it is maybe helpful as we go through some of these risks, if there's something to be commented on by the team themselves, but happy for you to carry on now. Thank you.
Not a problem, thank you. And yeah, and I mean, as I said at the beginning, I absolutely agree with Karen's comments, and also agree with what Paul said there as well. So thank you for those additions. If I carry on then with the report, so just for reference, section 3 is an illustrative report, and as I said, that you can see the potential wording for the emphasis of matter. Whether we conclude on that is subject to the consultation I referred to earlier, but it is there just for illustration at this point. Section 4 supports the comment that Karen has just made in relation to proposed adjustments at this point in time. Section 5 then is on the value for money. So I touched on this in the summary, but I think a couple of things just to make clear. So in common with the report that Gillian presented earlier, it should be noted that our value for money assessment relates to the year ended 31st of March 2020. So as a result, and this was clarified by the NAO in their guidance that they issued, we make an assessment on value for money at the conclusion. So therefore, the impact of COVID will be, for the purposes of the council, clearly primarily in 2021. In terms of the risk that we did have, which was the one relating to the building of the new town hall, there's a bit more detail on the following page as to what we identified the risk was at the time of the issuing the audit plan, and then what we did as a result of that. Sorry, on the next 2 pages, apologies, it splits over two pages. So we looked at the governance around the decision making that was put in place. We looked at the robustness of the analysis in terms of appraising the different options for delivery partners, and of course also the mitigation, given some of the announcements that Keir had made during the year. And we also looked at how that was managed in terms of the budgets and the resources allocated to it. We did have initially in the scope of work to look at the district heat network, but of course with the deferral of that as a project, that didn't form part of our work in coming to a conclusion. As I said, on page 28, you can see the conclusions of our work, which I think hopefully members will see as a positive in terms of the detail that we've been into and the conclusions we were able to draw. We noted that, of course, there were a dedicated work stream which had very clear governance requirements, and that these were revisited, reviewed and updated as appropriate. We also noted the ongoing monitoring of the risk register. I appreciate it says reviewed at Audit Committee approximately every 6 months, to the extent that there is one every 6 months. And noted obviously that was covered off again today. On the point around care, we looked at the measures put in place to safeguard the council in the context of the profit warnings that had been issued. And as you can see there, we can see that the risks that were being flagged and monitored against. So therefore, in conclusion, we were comfortable that those had suitable mitigating actions to ensure that the council was protected in its undertaking of this particular project. Again, I have to say, in the context of the 1920 year, clearly this is an ongoing project that spans more than 1 year, and we expect the risks to evolve clearly over the course of the project. I don't think there's anything else. Hopefully that detail is helpful. I don't think there's anything else I was going to flag in relation to the value for money conclusion. I'll keep going. The next 3 sections, I didn't have anything specific to bring to your attention in the next 3 sections. They're all ones that, as I say, address the responsibilities we have as external auditors to report to you as those charged with governance. If I move to section 9, which is the independent section. So firstly and importantly, as your external auditor, we are required to be and perceived to be independent of the council, and we assert that we are, and that's what we are required to do. So if we then turn to page 37, this references the point made in the earlier agenda item. And the context for this is both mentioned in the fee letter that was in the previous agenda item, and obviously also was outlined in terms of some of the context in our audit plan, which essentially is recognising that the landscape has changed for external audit, both in terms of the wider environment, but also clearly specifically in relation to local audit. And as PSA said in their letter, as the body responsible for setting the fees, they felt they did not have the information on which, or the detailed information on which to be able to reappraise, and hence they've kept the scale fee at a consistent level. However, we've been involved in ongoing discussions with them that recognising that actually now there's a change in regulatory environment and a change in risk profile within the sector, and therefore we have been asked to quantify what that has done to the costs of delivering audit, such that we can protect in the longer term the sustainability of the local audit regime. We have done that. There's a headline figure in there which obviously I recognise, as Karen pointed out, is a considerable increase on previously stated scale fees, and we have tried to break that down in a little bit more detail on the following page, and I'm happy obviously to take questions on any of those elements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will now begin consideration of the report. The process for discussion will be the same as before. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak. I might ask that please, Paul or Karen, if you want to come in on anything as well, if you can indicate if there's something you feel that will add value, whether it's a direct answer to a question or not from a member. So I'll hand over now, please, to any members who have questions. Thank you.
Councillor Flack, please.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. It's really helpful to get the overview. Perhaps unsurprisingly, I'm going to pick up on the increase in scale fees. I appreciate that you've broken it down slightly on the following slide and can give some explanation as to where some of these figures have come from. But for example, the first one, the change in risk profile, I do appreciate that does change the nature of your job. But I'm not entirely sure where £11,600 has come from. So I was wondering if you could give a little bit more detail as to how that figure's actually worked out and what that means in terms of how your job has changed and why we obviously now have to pay so much more. Thank you.
So, thank you, Councillor. So I think the first point is, and maybe I should have pointed out the first time, these are in a response to a request from PSAA. They are subject to clearly approval as the body responsible for setting the fees, and they so you know. This is at this point subject to approval. In terms of answering your question specifically, when what we were looking to do was capture the fact that for a variety of reasons within local government sector, there is more risk associated with doing audits in the sector, and more risks being identified as part of the audit process. And that's in response to both what councils are doing and also what we are being asked to do by the regulator, and therefore the procedures that we have to put in place, the amount of information that we have to look at, the depth and the professional skepticism that we have to go to in order to be able to come to a conclusion and be able to report to our regulator that we have done a sufficiently robust audit in order to issue an opinion, which is obviously clearly what is the output of our work and what you as those charged with governance are seeking to have from your external auditors. In terms of how it's calculated, then we have assessed, based on the additional procedures that we're required to do, what the additional requirement in terms of hours are, but also actually the degree to which the topics that we're being, or the areas that we're being asked to look at require specialist input when maybe previously they haven't in prior years, and so there's an element that's both an hours related, if you like, a volume related bit, but there's also a price related bit because we need to get more expensive or more qualified and experienced people involved in order to be able to come to that conclusion.
Okay, thank you. Do any other members have any questions? I would like to bring in our officers if they would like to speak at this point. In the meantime, before I certainly have some comments, but I'd like to see if they have anything to say, please, before we continue in the meantime, in case any other questions come up.
Yep, Karen, you're live. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just surprised that we were getting charged because she didn't get more efficient.
Yeah, so this stems back to when the tender was issued in 2016 by PSAA, which obviously Crawley opted into. That tender required all firms who wanted to respond to articulate in some detail how we would make the audits more efficient, and how we especially would use technology and automation in order to be able to do that. And therefore, in terms of the original estimates that were put in, as I say, in 2016, into so were calculated in 2016 and went into the bid that was early 2017. They incorporated assumptions over efficiencies, which the way that things have evolved have not been realised.
Karen, do you want to come back?
Yes, please. It just seems really unfair in a year when we're seeing significant loss of income and additional costs that we're having to pick up these sorts of costs.
Yep.
Yeah, Karen, obviously, as you know, and as we've spoken about, this is not, clearly this is a very difficult time for all authorities and all businesses, and to someone's comment earlier, we didn't predict there would be a pandemic any more than anyone else did. This isn't about a point in time, and it's about trying to fix the situation in the longer term, and we've already spoken very briefly about the Redmond review, and the recommendations that are coming out of that, which I think recognises the situation that we all find ourselves in, and we are clearly trying to work through to those. But I acknowledge that clearly at the current time, if I had chosen to put this together and present it, it wouldn't be right now. But that's where we are in terms of the cycle of this.
We have Councillor Purdy, who's requested to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to pick up the same subject, I'm afraid. You obviously put in a bid that you expected or hoped to be able to deliver to in 2016. You noted in your previous comments that you'd built into that efficiencies. If you've been unable to achieve those levels of automation and those efficiencies, that should fall to you, EY, and not to your customers. So I'm quite unhappy about that. I'd also take a view that we've seen many organisations over the course of the pandemic, over the last 6 months or so, put in place stronger automation processes in order to address the issues of not having people in the office. And I wouldn't mind pointing out, I don't know what EY will have saved on travel costs and subsistence costs by not putting its operatives out to customer premises. And whilst it's a little bit unfair, I don't see why I shouldn't add it in. Working elsewhere with EY through this period, I'm pleased to say that your colleagues have managed to deliver on time and on budget. So I'd like to see you do the same, please. Thank you.
Okay, so I think there were 3 points there that you'd like me to respond to. The first on the efficiencies point, I guess it's kind of consistent with my response to Karen's question, but then equally, we were asked by PSAA to lay out the breakdown of what it was that was causing the costs of audits to be higher than they previously were. Clearly, if they have a view in line with yours, sorry, I'm pointing at the screen here, in line with yours, then PSA will comment on that element of the proposal that we put forward. In terms of, I've now forgotten what your second point was. I can remember what your third one was. Do you want to? Can we go back to Councillor for his second point again?
Certainly, my second point was to consider the fact that obviously over the last 6 months, I know that EY have had a pretty strong working from home policy. You will have avoided significant travel costs and significant subsistence costs by not having your staff out on site. Now, I appreciate that no one wants that to be a permanent structure, but nevertheless, I am struggling with a 50% increase or proposed 50% increase in costs. And I perhaps look at it, it's still got several lines on there that say TBC. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you for reminding me. So to that point, this proposal is something that's a result of a series of conversations and discussions with PSAA that's been happening over the past year. It reflects the cost of delivering external audit, as I said, for the sustainability over the medium term. So it's not a point in time you know, in terms of factoring in the unusual circumstances that we have this year, be that you know, reduced travel costs or more work in certain areas. It's more about trying to re-benchmark the whole sector such that it works for the longer term in terms of local audit. To your last point about delivering on budget and on time in comparison with other audits, which obviously I don't know the context, but other audits elsewhere. Clearly, first of all, in terms of the on budget point, the point I've just made reflects that we're trying to reset and re-benchmark so that the budget is appropriate going forward. The timing point, I hope I've explained up front in terms of there are. And as I say, I can't comment on the one that you know from elsewhere, but there are in this particular sector a lot of interdependencies that maybe don't necessarily exist elsewhere that require us to work through and depend on reporting from elsewhere. I would make a point that MHCLG also recognise that, and that's why they moved the deadline for the publishing of audited accounts from the 31st of July to the 30th of November, as we indicate in our report. We absolutely anticipate meeting that deadline.
Thank you very much, Mr. Britton. I note the point about on time. My point on that was not around the understandable reasons for timelines to be moved, but the fact that that should not incur additional cost. Forgive me, I have a question really for the chair. Apologies, Chair. Undoubtedly, our officers will have been in contact with PSSA to express our dissatisfaction with the proposals. I was wondering if it was appropriate for the Audit Committee to write on the Council's behalf as well to express that view. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Actually, yes. I'm not sure, before I comment on anything, I just want to check if any other committee members want to come in and speak, but I do have something to say on that and this issue generally. But just check. Looks like I'm good to talk. Okay. I definitely agree that we should do that. I think there's several things. I mean, I think it's like a 54% increase in fees. And I take Andrew's point, which if I understand him correctly, this isn't a sort of snapshot in time. This is what you're looking at going. Actually, I guess I want to clarify. This is what I'm hearing. This is what you expect the fees to be sort of going forward as well. Like this is that correct? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yes, yes, indeed. This is about re-benchmarking and resetting so that it's sustainable in the longer term.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. My comment on that is that given all the work that is going on in the pandemic because of the pandemic, given how much it has detracted. Certainly this council's staff being taken away to deal with, on the ground issues of making sure people are housed and fed and taken care of. We've managed to keep up our end of the work pretty well, extremely well, actually, and also managed to do all of that for very little. And I think that to put this increase right now is completely unacceptable. I know my vice chair asked earlier about the 11,600. I don't know whether there is a more specific breakdown that goes to our head of finance or someone, but I certainly feel I certainly feel that, I would like to see, before I would be happy to sign off on anything, quite a specific breakdown, more specific than blanket sort of things, if that's possible, please. Kind of like, if you were my solicitor and my divorce lawyer and we're going to, you're going to itemize everything for me. I'd much prefer to see that, given the significant, it's 27,400 or something more than we were anticipating. And given all the challenges we've all been facing, I think that is, extremely disappointing to see that coming forward right now. And I certainly would like to propose to the committee that we that I can write on behalf of the committee as well to the PSAA, just to add our concerns about that. I would like to say that I appreciate the work that you have done. I know it's a challenge for everybody. I do appreciate the work that you have done. I do think that some of the issues as well around sort of some discrepancies in valuations, which seem to be having costs, I think, attached to them. Also, additional costs. Is that creating additional costs for us?
So,
can
I was
Andrew
going to say
be
the obvious. It's the bringing in of people with valuations expertise to identify to do the work that the differences have come out of. It's bringing in the expertise that translates to the additional costs and debating, and then the process of evaluating those findings. I'll go back on mute.
Yeah, so sorry, Chair. Just to add to that, there's two different things going on here. One of which is to my earlier comment about separating out what we're trying to achieve for the longer term sustainability, which recognises in the way that the FRC and with its regulatory powers is requiring auditors to look in more detail at things like valuations. And I know certainly that there are a number of people on this call who don't necessarily agree with that, but we have to produce an audit that complies with the regulations under which we operate. And so therefore, to Joe's point, there is additional cost involved in doing that, which is a combination, as I said before, of a volume of work required in order to get to that conclusion, and seeking specialist input where it is required.
Chair, we have Councillor Belbin wanting to.
Yes, obviously, as an accountant, I have sympathy. There's obviously been a lot of work that's been done this year with the town hall, etc. But I just wonder, if you put your commercial hat on, how would you justify this to a company that is out there struggling at the moment? That is quite a jump in your fees, just because we're a public authority. I think it needs to be justified in a little bit more detail, because I'm sure many chairmen would just reject it out of hand. And so I'd just like your comments on that. Would you put this increase to many companies out there? Thank you.
That's okay. So absolutely, yes. With my commercial hat on, we need to make sure that we clearly deliver on quality, which requires us to do the amount of work that that will deliver the opinion, and we need to be suitably recompensed for doing that. And if you were to sort of look at what audit fees are now doing in the wider, which reflects the wider regulatory environment that we're operating in, you will start to see amongst corporate clients there is an increase in the level of audit fees as well, and not just from EY. This is again a response to the overall position of the profession finds itself in, and as firms, you're probably aware that things like the proposed operational separation means that audit firms have to stand on their own 2 feet. They can't be cross-subsidised by work done by other parts of the firm, be that in transactions or consulting, and therefore absolutely where the amount of work required in order to deliver the audit requires an additional fee in order to be able to deliver that. We are and we will continue to do so, and you know, I appreciate it's difficult in this environment for me to prove, but you absolutely have to take my word for it that this is you know, this is not something about identifying public sector versus private sector. In fact, because of the, you know, the PSA arrangement, the fees have been, you know, have over the years decreased in real and actual terms over the last 10 years, clearly. And so this is just, as I apologise for repeating myself, but this is trying to make sure that going forwards we've got a suitable level of fees for the work we're now required to do.
Councillor Flack, please.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the chair and some of my councillor colleagues have touched on it, but what we really need is further information and ideally a breakdown before we can, in good conscience, agree to a more than 50% increase in our fees. I do appreciate what you're saying about it being across the board and every sector, but we can't just sign off public money without really knowing what it's actually going to.
Hi, I'm going to jump in on this one actually first, because thank you, Councillor Flack, for that. Yes, I actually am going to request that you please provide to our head of finance and chief accountant a more specific breakdown of what these additional costs entail. I'm sure you're able to give, so you know, you don't pluck 13,400 out of the air or whatever. So I would appreciate it if you would please provide a specific breakdown of the additional costs to our head of finance. And that's a formal request, please.
No, absolutely. Happy to provide more information. To your comment earlier about divorce lawyers, this isn't this is not an hours on the clock calculation, and I know you appreciate that, but absolutely, clearly, you know, we propose these and we're asked to provide the proposal by PSA. We've shared it with you today. Obviously, I'm sure you know that I knew that this was the sort of discussion we've had, and I'm perfectly comfortable with where we've got to. But I absolutely understand your request from a governance perspective, and we'll look to provide some more information in due course.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's all right.
Thank you. Yeah, I know you can't, you know, it's not necessarily itemized exactly, but if you can give some more specific information that lets us dig into it a bit deeper, thank you. Just want to quickly ask, I don't think there's anyone else waiting to speak on the committee. So I'm now going to say that I would like to move on to the recommendation. However, I want to add an action in the minutes, as discussed by Councillor Purdy, that as chair of the audit committee, I will write to PSAA as well on behalf of the committee. I can share that letter with committee members beforehand, expressing our concerns around the fee increases, if the committee agrees to that.
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. I move that the committee receive the report and note the report, and ask that the vice chair second, please.
I'm happy to formally second that recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Is that agreed? We're noting the report then formally. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the report has been noted and we have those action points. Thank you. So now we will, and thank you both, Andrew and Joe, for providing the report and being here with us this evening. We appreciate that. So now we move on to agenda item 9, approval of the 2019-2020 statement of accounts. And would Paul Windus, Chief Accountant, please present the report to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the statement of accounts to the Audit Committee for approval. As has been stated previously, the government has pushed back the deadline for the audit and signing of the accounts from 31st of July to 30th of November due to coronavirus. There's a number of attachments to the report. On page 47 is the letter of representation that the committee will sign. There is actually an updated version of this in the supplementary agenda in the EY report. Page 51 is the narrative report, and this provides the link between the accounts and the outturn reports that was considered by Cabinet in June. On page 77 is the main body, the statement of accounts, and in my covering report I've highlighted a couple of the key figures in there, and the movement in reserves has decreased during the year from usable reserves have reduced from 92.8 million to 78.6 million, and that's really down to the extensive capital programme the council's got. And on the balance sheet, our assets have increased from 664 million to 701 million, and that was down to the pension fund going from a net liability to a net asset in the year. On page 189 is the annual governance statement, which has been signed off by the leader and the chief exec. And on page 201 is a CIPFA guide to understanding local authority statements. So that should be read, or the statement of account should be read in conjunction with that to make it easier to understand. As the audit's ongoing, we're asking committees to delegate approval to the chair to sign the accounts and letter of representation at a later date when the audit's concluded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't know if Karen has anything she wanted to say before we move on to, or Paul, I presume you sort of will wait for questions. No, okay. We will now begin consideration of the report. The process for discussion will be the same as before. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak. Doesn't look like we have any questions from our committee members. So barring any additional comments from the officer, from our chief accountant or our head of finance, I will move on to say that all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, and we move on to the recommendations as set out in the report. Rather than voting on recommendations 2.1 A through C individually, I intend to take a single recorded vote on the recommendations as set out in the report. If any committee member disagrees with this approach, can you please indicate now by turning on your camera? Ever hold your peace.
Yeah, I can confirm, Chair, no committee member has turned their camera on. So we'll take a single recorded vote on the recommendations.
I think you're on mute, Jennifer.
So many things to juggle. I'm actually going to mute myself for just 1 second. Sorry, just checking a little administrative thing. All right. So once you are live, please unmute your microphone, ensure your camera is on, and state whether you are for or against the recommendations or if you abstain. I move that the committee agree the recommendations as set out in the report. Please note that this moves the recommendations to the vote and does not necessarily indicate my support nor that of the Vice Chair for the recommendations themselves. Can I ask the Vice Chair to please second?
Yep, I'm happy to second this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Would the Democratic Services Officer please conduct the recorded vote?
This is a recorded vote on recommendation 2.1 of the report, and we will start with Councillor Tina Belvin, please.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Flack, please.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Miller-Smith.
4.
And Councillor Purdy, please.
For the recommendation. Thank you.
That's unanimous in favour of the recommendation.
Okay, so the recommendations as set out in the report have been approved. There is no supplementary agenda. Therefore, with the business of the committee concluded, the meeting is now closed at 8:26 p.m. Thank you very much for your time.
Goodbye.